blending, and we're blending, and we're done.
I know Mr. Data isn't supposed to smile, but here it comes. Come on, guys, let's do this.
Yeah, I'm sweating my bald cap off.
So what's our first pose gonna be?
I say we begin with a classic Star Trek fight scene.
I'll set the timer.
And there you go. Just what does it mean to be a Trekkie, right? One of my most popular videos for my YouTube channel have been about the FASA variant of the Star Trek role-playing game from the 80s. And I did a number of videos on the various books and modules that I have. And the truth is, and one of my newest subscribers sent me a comment asking, was I a Trekkie? And that got me kind of chuckling and smiling and thinking, well, just what is a Trekkie? Yeah, Frankie, exactly. What is a Trekkie, right? It's an enthusiast, a fanboy, somebody who's obsessed with the concept of Star Trek and its universe. The funny thing, well, to me, now I'm sure that there's others out there, some of you can more than happy to put that in the comments below, but Trekkies are very specific in Star Trek. You don't hear any similar catchy phrases for Star Wars fanatics or for Lord of the Rings fanatics. Tolkien's, I mean, you know, come on. But Trekkies kind of stand out. One of the reasons for that is that some of the earliest sci-fi mainstream in your home series. This is that so many people, it's an iconic thing. So many people were exposed to it than Star Wars when it came along. And Star Wars came not too long after I got introduced. I can remember watching the original Star Trek TV series with Captain Kirk on various TVs at my aunt and uncle's house, laying on the floor watching it when it came on in the evening, on the weekend when I was staying there, or at home with my own little black and white TV in my bedroom. It never played. My dad never watched it on his TV in the living room. So, but I watched it. I can't remember when I didn't watch it. I was born in 1966, so by the time 70, 71 rolled around, I'm old enough to recognize and be enraptured by the possibility of space travel and aliens and all these other things, even though some of the stuff was considered campy. And by no means was it the only sci-fi series out there. You had The Land of the Giants, you had Lost in Space, Space 1999, Doctor Who. As I got older, I watched all of those. But Trek was something a little bit above the ordinary. It stood out, and it persevered. It lasted. You know, even though the original TV series only ran for 4 seasons or so, it wasn't long after the season ended that the first movies started coming out, and they filled the gaps until the next generation, and so on and so forth. So a whole nother set of generations of people were raised on it, and that's one of my subscriber was commenting on that his father was a Trekkie and he became a second generation Trekkie, which is a new term for me, but it's applicable. So he grew up on TNG and where we just continued. So when I was a child, Star Trek was a big thing in our life, but I had other passions too. In 1977, when Star Wars came out, I was 13, something like that. And I was just obsessed with it. When we were kids, and this is from my generation and older generations who probably understand the reference, when we were out in the backyard as young boys playing, we played Army. We played war. You know, our grandparents, our parents played cowboys and Indians. We were emulating the war stuff from World War II and other, you know, the Vietnam War and things like this, which that's just the nature of the young men playing and presenting things. So it's the, the art of the imagination, the stuff that allowed us to continue when we started to get into role-playing games and into other advents of our as we got older, because it's hard to explain sometimes. I mean, I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a silver-tongued devil that can sit here and spin this up to make it sound. I'm just telling you off the cuff from my experience and my view of this phenomenon, and doing it in maybe a little bit choppy and chunky way, and not doing mispronouncing my words sometimes, or not being able to pronounce them at all, no matter how hard I try. It's all part and partial of what it is and what it was to be young and growing up. And I'm sure it's still that way today, although I have to admit, I think the last two generations have replaced that active imagination out in the back pasture, out in the backyard, or down at the local whatever, with video games, which lacks something in that imaginative drive. Just saying, right? I'm not going to hear and get off onto that, but make me think, because when Star Wars came out, my friends and I stopped playing war and played Star Wars. We were stormtroopers, or one of us would be a stormtrooper chasing the heroes and the Han Solos and the Lukes, and we found ways to be creative ways to create the iconic toys that we saw. I mean, we had some fiber. I got my hands on a couple fiberglass. Well, I didn't know at the time, but they were end pieces for a large CB radio antenna, and well, they're kind of expensive. But I didn't know they were laying out in a pile behind my grandfather's shed, and I just carted a couple home and put some plastic handles on the end, duct tape, and turned them into lightsabers. And my friends and I proceeded to whack each other senseless with them. And my best friends, well, they got their hands on things like, these toys are the earlier versions of these things. And well, I didn't. My dad, he worked for Firestone. He made respectable money, but we didn't just go out frivolously. I want, because it wasn't your birthday, it wasn't Christmas. You weren't getting nothing. At some point, I had a Stormtroopers blaster, the 11 or whatever, and I had it for years, and I don't know what happened to it. It disappeared at my folks' house someplace. I picked up this one at a DAV here over the summer, and I saw this on a shelf at a store for fairly cheap, so I bought these just so I could have some props, right? Not because I like running around my backyard now like we did back in the day. I had to get creative, where my mother was quite creative, and we created out of scrap wood and plastic and things we found out in the garage of the barn. We made our own version of Han Solo's pistol and a couple other toys. So I had my versions and painted them black, and so they might have been wood and plastic and metal, but they worked, right? In some cases, they looked much more impressive than the store-bought ones that my best friends were running around with. I'm just saying. So it is part and partial. So we stopped playing Army and Soldier. It became Star Wars, and we were in depth with it. We didn't do. So what would you call that? Childhood LARPing? Live action role play for children. Well, that's what children do. And when we get older, we gave it a nifty name so we could justify doing what these gentlemen are doing right now, and dressing up as our favorite characters from an iconic TV series that they really, really connect with. And that wasn't any different, but my friends and I, we didn't run around playing Star Trek in the backyard. We didn't make tricorders and phasers and go after Gorn or Klingon or something like that. No, we reserved that for playing in our rooms with my version of Star Trek, the FASA game system. And which would be our version, or my generation's version, of the video game consoles that our kids grew up with, our grandkids are growing up with now. So we had to provide our own imagination. They provided source material and concepts and ideas and rules source to work with, and we just added imagination and enthusiasm. Now, typical of a Trekkie, do you have to have, like these gentlemen, have some sort of Star Trek uniform hanging in your closet or have had one at some time. Well, no, I don't think you do. I know that at least once or twice I went trick-or-treating as a Starfleet officer because my mother was easy to make the uniform. Very didn't need a lot of props and extra stuff. I know that I wore one to a couple conventions because that's what everybody did. I mean, it's quite popular and quite more elaborate today than it was 35 years ago to go to a convention and dress up. It was just kind of I wanted to, you just want to blend in or stand out depending on how your view on things are. But for me, Star Trek and Star Wars are apples and oranges. They're both fruit. They're both edible. I enjoy both of them. They have different perspectives. As a role-playing game, as a movie, Star Trek to me is more cerebral, more potentially our future, what our future could be like. It's far more likely than what we would see in Star Wars. That's not saying Star Wars couldn't be our future, but the odds are Trek is much more. And it's in that same reason that we see so many things that have been our culture and our technology has been driven or influenced by Star Trek in the past. Now look at our cell phones today. They're communicators. Our cell phones are far more technologically capable than the communicators were even in the later generations of Star Trek. I'm just pointing out what a lot of other people point out. Our idea of, there's medical tricorders. There are devices today that work on similar principles, are gradually becoming more and more complicated and capable. Of course, we don't have transporters, we don't have faster than light travel, but the fact of the theories are there. Entire generations of scientists and engineers grew up on these shows and found inspiration to pursue what might not have been pursued, or it might have been pursued later. Well, we want this. We want this sort of thing. We want it in our lives. We dream of it in the back of our heads, and it's those dreamers, it's those nerds, those weirdos, as Joe Rogan likes to put it, that drives society. One of the reasons other countries are not so good at doing things. The Russians are quite accomplished, but they're not very inventive. And one of the reasons they're not inventive is because they don't get into this sort of stuff. They're not weirdos, as Joe Rogan would put it, right? And there's good aspects for that. A lot of countries the same way. They don't inspire the geeks and the nerds and the dreamers. If in some cases they actually crush them, they do their level best to keep that out of what they consider a weakness of in their society, which is a strength for us, and it always will be. And I think this what makes us Trekkies at heart. And the next generation Trekkies is an awesome concept, and if what have you. I mean, I'm not a big fan of the Discovery series. I've watched the first. Yes, Frankie, what are you doing? Yes, what are you doing? You can get yourself in trouble. Well, look out that window and you climb through all the stuff to get to it. It's a different Trek, right? It's just like when the Kelvin line became. Something changed and it's a different Trek. It's still Star Trek, but it's not my Star Trek. It's like Star Wars. Since the House of Mouse got the grip on the canon and pretty much, peed all over the old canon, ignored it, even to the point where Kennedy sat there and said, you just don't have a lot of background material to work from. Ignoring the thousands of books and comic books and all the other stuff. It's just, you're insane, woman. I'm sorry, Kathleen Kennedy, you're insane. If you really, this is what happens when you give your favorite franchise over to people who don't get it. She is not a Trekkie. She is not a Star Wars fanatic. She does not understand. And because she does not understand, they're destroying a lot of things that worked. And now that this final series for the Skywalker thing is finished, I haven't gone to see it in the movies. I have not gone to the theater to see it. In my head, I can't justify the $50-odd it would take my wife and I to go see it, go pay for it and pay for popcorn and pop and sit through this thing. I wait for it to come out in 6 months or a year on Netflix and watch it there. I enjoyed Solo. A lot of people made a lot of stink about it. I enjoyed Rogue One. So the potential's there. The Mandalorian, is, from what I can see, is a very good, very well-written series. So the potential's there. And now that the House of Mouse is now free to create their version of Star Wars, maybe I will become more enthusiastic for new series down the road. But for the current series, not so much. And that's part of my heritage. Growing up and being so influenced by what I grew up with, Lucas's version, his view and things, and all those would-be Lucases who contributed between the novels and the comic books. Hey, there were some bad books and there's some bad comics in the series, but for overall, they're better than majority are pretty damn good as far as I'm concerned. Enough so that I bought them. As I was telling my subscriber, I said, and I'm sorry if I don't have your name handy right off the top, and I remember I'll plug it into my comments section after I'm done with this and I post it. I had 70, I think I counted over 75 Star Trek novels at one time. And when we had to clean everything out of my mom's house and everything had to go into storage, I had to thin down some of my stuff. And I've read all my Star Trek novels once or twice, some of them 3 or 4 times a piece. And that's the reason you buy a novel. It's just not to just buy it and shove it up there on the wall. But some people do, but I like to have them because I can read them over again. I can use them for reference material for my games, and it's inspiration. So I had over 75, majority of DS9's novels, and a scattering of various Enterprise and the old school stuff and some one-offs and some sidebar stuff, some Next Generation stuff. Although I like Next Generation and I pretty much watched all the episodes of it, I never got into it like I did DS9 or the original series as much. There was a lot of my issue with Next Generation had to do more about, for me, they were not realistic as to how things probably should work. And in the later series, when we see Enterprise come along, we see it in DS9, we see it in Voyager, it is an ugly universe out there with a lot of people, a lot of beings in competition with each other, and the Federation's high moral ideals and diplomatic approach to everything and its arrogance is some of its major flaws. Over and over again, we see the same thing. Some big bad foe comes along, and Star Trek almost has to reinvent itself to deal with it. Oh, they overcome the problem in the long run. But that's why I like the latter seasons of DS9 with the Dominion War, because it actually showed Starfleet people being human and falling back on some pretty dirty tricks and some nasty things, and also our capability of reintroducing the concept of warships into our fleet. The Galaxy was a pretty potent starship, but it was very unrealistic. And in aspects, it's a generational ship in some aspects where it's designed for long-term exploration for the comfort of the crew by bringing the families along having a moving city, having small, bars, and having the lounge, and having other things that we would find in a city or a small town, as well as having decent accommodations for the crew. There's nothing wrong with that, but the fact that it was exploration and diplomacy first, defense, not offense, defense second. Yeah, it could poke a pretty powerful offense when it needed to, but it was designed as a defense to defend itself, not to progressively gauge a foe that doesn't want to or doesn't care or doesn't want to deal with diplomacy. Their idea of diplomacy is a club. So we've seen that later on, and it's great stuff. So when I look at what makes people Trekkies, I don't know that there's any one good sense of word. I've been a sci-fi fan my entire life. I have been a fan of Star Wars, Star Trek. Like I said, DS9 or Deep Space Nine, Space 1999. Get that out there. Dune, the series Dune, the books. The movie was okay, but they don't have nothing. The books on the books. There's a lot of books with a deep history there, and I've read quite a few of those. Matter of fact, I mean, I've got a series of them right here, sitting under my shelf over here that I picked up on the discount at JCD and Hobby where I go to, because and they're on my list to read right now. I'm working my way through the latest David Weber book. Once I'm done with that, then I'll move on. I have Star Trek Scoundrels, I think, and I want to take care of that one. Let me pause here for a second. So, like I said, am I a Trekkie? You betcha I'm a Trekkie. By definition, by example, by presentation. I mean, I think my second car had the Star Trek symbol sticker on the back of it. I wore homemade costume. I've seen every movie, and several times. In the case of most of them, there's been a few of the latter movies I only went to see once, and then I watched them again when they came out on video or out on Netflix, because it's a money thing. Some movies are better than others. Some I don't like the way they turned. I watched the entire the entire original TV series numerous times in rerun. I watched The Next Generation pretty much religiously. As long as it was on a channel I could access, I watched it. When the series Enterprise came out, I was really stoked. I really liked the series and where it went. I was disappointed how it suddenly ended. It was a kind of a bum rush toward the end there to conclude it, which I'm grateful that they did, because there's a lot of TV series that they just yank off the air. They just, one day they're there and the next they're not. Well, but Enterprise had, and there was a mixed season. I was able to watch it, but I got the first season and part of the second season, and then it was like a big chunk of episodes went missing, or the channel that I was watching on, it just stopped. It didn't show them for some reason. It wasn't until a couple years ago that I got on Netflix and watched the entire thing, what was there. So there could have been much more. I watched most of Voyager. I can't say I watched every episode of Voyager, but I watched most of them. I had mixed feelings on some of the stuff they were doing and some of their episodes, but the crew in general and this odyssey of getting home and encountering and dealing with the Borg on the way, it was good stuff, right? And of course, DS9, Deep Space Nine, I watched all of it. And then I went back 2 years ago, because Netflix has the entire thing, and I watched it front to back. Watched the entire thing, 2 or 3 episodes at a time, a couple times a week, and because I enjoyed it that much. Because to me, it was a dirtier, grittier, more realistic Federation or Star Trek universe. And there's nothing wrong with Gene Roddenberry's view. I understand quite well what he was going for and what his philosophy was, but things have changed a little bit. And we like a little bit of conflict. We like a little bit more, desperation and war and fighting. We got to see what massive armadas of Star Trek universe warships going at each other would look like on this big screen and the little screen, and it was awesome. Right up there in alongside the battles from Star Trek or Star Wars. Don't be wrong on Star Wars. Like I said, I'm a diehard Star Wars fanatic up until the House of Mouse started jumping on things. There's a lot of books that have come out in the last 5 years I have not read. I can't keep up with everything. That's part of it. I mean, you get saturated. There's just so much coming out. You can't keep up with everything. As for the comics, I had a few of the Star Wars comics and Star Trek comics way back in the day, but I was never a comic book fan per se. There's nothing wrong with comic books, don't get me wrong, but running out every week or every month to the store and buying 20 of them to keep up with this, that, and the other thing, well, it was cost prohibitive. I could buy novels. As it was, I was doing the same thing with novels. That's another reason why I didn't buy every Star Trek novel that came out. I just focused on DS9 at some point. Star Wars, I focused on Star Wars. I bought everything that came out until about 2010, and I bought. Those who you are not familiar with BattleTech and MechWarrior, I bought every BattleTech and MechWarrior book that came out until we got into the Dark Ages series, and I got the first 5 or 6, and then it just got to be I just couldn't keep up, and they fell off the wayside. And I keep looking for them occasionally to crop up, and if I can snag them used and plug them into my books that I have, awesome. Forgotten Realms. I bought a lot of Forgotten Realms novels, and that's a world setting for Dungeons and Dragons, if you're not familiar with that. And the novels, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of them. At some point, I try to keep up with the Drizzt Do'Urden saga, and there's still some books that have come out that I don't have. I borrowed some from some local libraries and read them when I could. We're back to the, now it's a time constraint thing. I don't read. I read every night. I read before I go to bed, but it's usually only a couple pages, so it takes much longer. There were some times where a previous job basically sat on my butt most of the time and stared at a window, so I read a lot, and not so much now. That is the way life goes, and they're more selective on some of the books that I'm going to read. And since the entire legacy of Star Wars was chucked into the dumpster, I have no desire to buy into the new canon aside from the movies and maybe TV series when I can see them. They kind of, I don't know, spoiled it a little bit for me. I'm not happy with how they handled this last trio of movies. Disney's done a very, very mean and terrible thing. And there's other TV series. I mean, I watched all the Doctor Who series. Now we have yet another Doctor, and it's terrible. There's certain, I have nothing against role exchanging. I would have no issue with a woman being the Doctor, although it's being the person, they're going out of their way to ram it down my throat, and I don't like it, so I'm done with it. The other couple series the same way. I won't watch the new Batwoman series because it's trying too damn hard to shove the social justice mindset down my throat, and it's shameful. It's shameful how part of our social society today is determined to rewrite history and beat the other half up for the process, and if you look at the videos and the movies today, it's costing them. You don't have to go far to see that most of these new movies that are coming out, these new TV series, they're bombing. They're just bombing because, the same reason with Kennedy. She basically threw a bucket of cow manure all over, I guess mouse manure all over several entire generations of fanboys and fangirls by trying to change everything to do it their way, and then doing it in such a ham-fisted way to insult us. There just isn't a whole lot of information back there. They don't have a lot of stuff to work around. We're just a bunch of people sitting around the table and they're, coming up with shooting some ideas. Well, ignoring the fact that there's thousands of books and novels and games and video games and previous movies and TV series, etc., etc., etc. Yeah, it's just insulting. How do you not pretend like that's not there? You do that on purpose. Well, you guys get what you deserve. So you get what you deserve, and you're not getting my cash. My cash is reserved. I mean, it's been a rough month for us, and December was a rough month, and this month is not any better. We're keeping our head above water, but my money's tight, and it's not worth going out to see a movie, even slipping out and seeing a movie by myself, to save money, because my wife's not a sci-fi fan at all. She doesn't like any of this stuff. She just goes because I go. but she doesn't understand any of it, and that's fine, right? That's fine. That's not an issue. Frankie would go, but Frankie wouldn't sit still. I mean, not taking Frankie to a movie because Frankie wouldn't sit still. He'd be crawling all over everybody and everywhere in the theater, getting in the way. And it is what it is. So am I a Trekkie? Are you a Trekkie? How do you look at this sort of phenomenon? How does this influence? How has Star Trek influenced your life? How has Star Wars? How has any TV movie or series that you grew up with really influenced how you perceive the rest of your life? You know, how do we become enamored with the games that we play? You know, like I said, I just did a couple don't on my channel that you'll know because there's 120 of you that subscribed, and you'll at least know that I posted. Whether you view them or not, I don't know. I know that they're good stuff, and I have many more to go. I was going to do yet another one. This will be for next weekend if things pan out. On a personal note, which, you know, I've been accused of putting too much personal information, yammering about my life in videos, and I've been trying hard not to do that, if you've noticed. But I haven't done a video. I'm 2 weeks behind, so I apologize for those, and it was for good reasons. I came down with, I don't know, some type of flu. It hit pretty hard. First time I've been sick in a year, and it put me in bed for a couple of days. I just didn't have any energy. I was hot and cold and just hacking and coughing pretty bad. I didn't have a lot of sinus issues with it. It's just always down here in my lungs. And I've had a history of bronchitis in the past. It has been probably 20 years since I've had a case of bronchitis, and I don't want it again. But I had bronchitis once in the 90s that got so bad that it turned to pneumonia, and I was in the hospital for a week because they had to put antibiotics in through a drip. One of the problems with my generation is they threw antibiotics at us for everything, and as we got older, a lot of those antibiotics were no longer functionable. They didn't work like they used to, and they had to use more powerful stuff. And I changed. I don't know why I didn't catch bronchitis, but that notion when you start hearing the harassment, you can feel it in your lung. You know you're on a track. You're on a road that's not going to end well if it doesn't get quashed. And I had I don't know. Everybody was telling me do this, use this, take this, and all these home remedies, over the counter stuff. One of my personal things is I don't have health insurance. I can't go to the doctor's office unless I'm dying. Unless it's a crucial, if I'd have got bronchitis, I'd have gone to the doctor's office and figured out later how to pay the bill, because my company's too small. It does not offer health insurance. And while Obamacare sounds great, if you get into it, it depends on what you make, right? I make just enough money that I don't qualify for Obamacare, which means I don't get a kickback, a discount, and I had to shell out $400 or $500 a month for health care, and fortunately, my wife, she's disabled. She has epilepsy. She has Medicare because of her disability. She gets Social Security, right? You know, if anybody are familiar with anybody's trying to get SSI or Social Security, it takes a long time to get. My wife got it in 5 months, full disability in 5 months after she lost her job because of her seizures increasing. Just so. It's a legitimate disability. So she has insurance, I don't. And it scared me a little bit because I know what bronchitis can do. And it leads to pneumonia. Pneumonia will kill you. I was, apparently in that state once some years ago. And I hope eventually here, a couple more years, be able to afford to buy insurance. The old days, you just go to the local, we have a county hospital, you could just go. If you had no insurance, they did what they could for you, and that was that. You didn't get a big bill for it. Now you get a big bill. Well, I'm still trying to pay the wife. My wife fell down last spring when we first bought the house, and her insurance was in flux, and she didn't have insurance. We took her to the emergency room because she had a big hole in her leg, and they stitched her up and cost us $1,200. We're still paying that. I can't just throw $1,000. My furnace is kind of having issues. I can't. We have a home insurance. It cost me $700 to extend it for another year. That covers all of our appliances, so $75. And they come out and told me my heat exchanger's bad. Okay, fix it, replace it. Well, they've been the company that the insurance sent out have got some dodgy commentary, and they are going on about, well, for $1,200 we could put in, with what the insurance covers and $1,200 you could get a new furnace. And I said, dude, you can't get $12 out of me, let alone $1,200. I paid for that insurance. You fix my damn furnace. So they ordered a part supposedly Monday or Tuesday. They'll come in here and put that new heat exchanger. So the furnace will work. You got to let the temperature drop down into the 60s, and then fire the furnace up. You can't leave it on just automatic, because it'll just kick on and off, on and off, on and off, and not do anything but blow cold air. So if you let the house get down to a certain temperature and let the heat exchanger stay cold, then you'll fire up and it'll run. And I set the temp into the 80s, 81, 82, and let it run until it shuts off, and then I kick it off and let the house cool down. We got some space heaters, so it hasn't got down below 59 in here, which is pretty good for this little house. My understanding, cinder brick houses stay warmer longer. We got a couple space heaters we borrowed from my work. See, there's the other thing, right? Like I said, December, my truck I used to work, it went through a series of mechanical failures. It just one thing after another, and it concluded with, we got bad gas. I had to fuel up. I worked all day Friday before Christmas. And that evening, I was going to work all night too, and trying to make up lost jobs. And I had to get gas for the truck. I stopped, shut it off, got gas, went to the convenience store, came back out. Truck hasn't started since. And we think it was bad gas. We don't know. Something got into the fuel injection system. And our mechanic said, we could take that apart, but we can't guarantee it'll work. And it's an old it's a 15-year-old Nissan. They don't build them. So getting parts is hard, and getting people who know how to work on them is just as hard. And he wasn't confident enough of tearing it apart by hand. And even then, it would have been $4,000 or $5,000 between labor and what have you. A replacement used one was $2,300 to $10,000, depending on where you got it. And my boss just decided, okay, well, we're getting another truck. Well, they've been talking about that since spring. Well, now we're a month and a half behind on a lot of our accounts. I did a head count yesterday. It's 35 since Christmas. We've had 35 accounts that have not been serviced, that are past due because of lack of a truck. Now I've been running around with a shop vac and some 55-gallon drums and a pickup, doing as many of the small ones I can do just to get some hours. And they've had me working in the office. And the company, is a small mom and pop operation, and mom and pop are tired. They're tired of all the problems, and they have an opportunity to sell the business this year. And they're pretty much dead set on trying to do so if they can get a good enough offer from the people that want to buy it. Which means sometime between now and the summer, I'll be out of a job there, and I'll either go to work for this other company or be looking for another job, which, I kind of knew when I first came to work for these people that he's in his 60s and none of their kids want anything to do with the business. So, he's going to retire at some point. I just figured it'd be a couple more years. But, that's why I went and got my CDL over the summer and some other things. See, this is one of these things you can say, well, will this have anything to do with my channel? Well, this stuff affects me and my channel. It affects my opportunities. Last weekend, the previous week, I was just too sick to do anything. And then last weekend, well, the boss found a truck in Texas. Yes, Frankie, that's a shoestring. She gets amused by everything. Wednesday through Saturday, I was on the road. We drove as far as a place called Enos, Texas, southeast Texas, almost to Louisiana. And we left on Wednesday, got to Oklahoma City before the boss's bank called and said they needed a signature from him in person. And so we had to turn around and drive home. And then he ran around Thursday morning, and then we got back on the road at 1 in the afternoon and drove until 3 and got a hotel room in Enos, Texas at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we were just beat. Got up the next morning with about 5 hours of sleep and set out to go go get this truck. And he'd hired somebody to go down and inspect it, which he kind of should have done before we left. He admits that. It turned out that it had dodgy brakes and no air conditioning and a bunch of other issues with it. A lot of the stuff, it's a used truck. We could have fixed some of it, but you can't drive a truck 1,100 miles, 1,200 miles with dodgy brakes. One brake cylinder in the back was completely shot, and the bags for the air brakes were all old and cracked, according to the inspector. We were with 2 hours from the truck, which is not too far from where the battleship Texas is moored, and turned around. They have bosses that way. We're not buying that truck. And turned around and drove. Well, we drove back to Enos, Texas in a driving rainstorm and hail and tornado warnings. He decided, well, we went back to the same hotel and spent the rest of the day there. Got up early the next morning, and then we was back in Des Moines by 11 o'clock at night, Thursday, Saturday night. So, and he had to, not only did he pay for the hotels and the food, and the gas to drive us up and back, he did all the driving. He didn't need me to drive, I guess, just to drive the truck back. But I was on the clock for every hour we were in motion. So, I mean, I had 16 and a half hours just from Wednesday. We're just sitting in the van entertaining him, as we drove down and back, and so on and so forth. So, makes for a couple of good checks last week and this week, but is what it is. So I couldn't do any videos last week, and I couldn't really do anything on the cell phone when I'm standing there in the truck, because once again, he's not a sci-fi guy. He's not in the same world that I work in, that I operate in, that we operate in, and there's nothing wrong with that. The world's made of different people. Well, you can hear that wind just howling outside right now. We had about 5 inches of snow yesterday, and then we had freezing rainfall on top of it. So now we got 50, 60 mile an hour winds out there today. I worked out yesterday. By noon, I went to go do another customer, and I slid down the street in front of their place. I didn't notice any tracks in their driveway, so I assumed nobody was there. But just missed a parked car, slid through an intersection, and then went back to the shop and went home. So here we are making videos today, and thanks for listening for the last 10 minutes of me rambling and babbling. Time you see this, just cut it off and go home. Yeah. Till next time, look up the Rogue. The Joe Rogan Experience. I just discovered him a couple weeks ago. So, till next time.